Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I hope you all had an enjoyable lunch, are fit and alert for our session now on building inclusive innovation in international development. My name is Holger Meinke. I'm the chair of the ISDC, the Independent Science for Development Council that advises the CGIAR. And I'm also an adjunct research professor for global food sustainability at the University of Tasmania. And it's my great pleasure to chair this session this afternoon and one by one introduce our esteemed speakers. So just to give you a little bit of a background of what we are doing today and why we're doing it. As I said, I chair the ISDC. But obviously, this is a group of scientists from all over the world. One of them, my vice chair, Nompumelelo Obokoh, is one of our speakers this afternoon. We also have Fielke, Abera. I actually need to wear my glasses, I just figured it, because the screen isn't quite big enough. Fielke Abera, Magali Garcia, Andrew Ash, Sunita Katayala, and Leslie Torrenson. Also, I want to introduce the two members from the member from the Secretariat, as well as an independent consultant who contributed quite significantly to the work that we're talking about this afternoon. And that's Alison Grove-Smith, who leads the Secretariat, is the director, and Chris Nekra. Now, why do we need to focus on inclusive innovation? This is something that the ISDC has identified as a priority as we were evaluating the new research proposals, the new research initiatives for the CGIAR. And it quickly became apparent that there's actually a much broader need beyond the CG for focusing on inclusive innovation. Because too often, many of the actors in our agri-food systems are excluded. For instance, poor farmers on marginal lands, female and younger farmers, entrepreneurs. But inclusivity matters more broadly as well. We need to be more inclusive when it comes to the domain expertise that we deploy in order to generate new insights about our agri-food systems. We need to be more inclusive about the breeds and the crops and the varieties that we include, that we consider for our food systems. Research outside the mainstream requires attention because it could potentially boost sustainable food systems in a way that we hadn't envisaged. So the focus on just the technical aspect of innovation is clearly insufficient to address the challenges that we today face in our food systems. Therefore, we as ISDC have developed a work stream internally, and I just introduced the members of that, that aims to address that specifically, but we want to broaden that out and explore inclusive innovation as it relates to governance in research organizations, local needs and lessons that we learn from farmers. It's about that co-creation of a research agenda, the social responsibilities in that co-creation of that agenda. And we also want to address how inclusivity can aid sustainable agri-food systems. We have an exciting program today. I will introduce the speakers as they come up, but we will cover inclusivity in innovation processes, the co-creation of sustainability in the innovation of sustainable agri-food systems, the effectiveness of inclusive partnerships for international development and innovation in areas with limited resources, and then finally have a reflection on inclusive partnerships for one CGIAR. This will be followed by a panel discussion where we will ask our panel members some pertinent questions in relation to the topic that we are discussing today. I want to point out that this forms part of the series of our science forum. The ISDC regularly conducts a science forum that is supposed to stimulate these sorts of discussions right across the CG. We already had an event a few weeks ago with the FAO as part of the Science Innovation Forum, where we talked about quality of research for development to strengthen institutional innovation. That was on the 13th of October. Today, that is the second part of our forum, where we are talking about how we build inclusive innovation in international development. With this, I want to introduce our first speaker. And to do that, I need to open my phone. Thank you. And I would like to ask Dr. Simon Fielke to come up to the podium. Simon is a research scientist with the CSIRO. He conducts applied human geographical research into implications of the digitization of agricultural innovation systems, and his work focuses on future agricultural land use, particularly in regards to the governance of agri-food systems within Australia, but also more broadly. Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Holger. You might be wondering why a national science organisation representative is talking to you today about inclusivity and international development. I can assure you we'll get to that by the end, and I hope to provide some examples of where inclusivity as part of our everyday research activities has led to beneficial outcomes. But first, I'd like to acknowledge a few people. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands that we meet on today, and the lands that I work and live on. The Turrbal, Yagara, Jagera and Quandamooka people of Meanjin or Brisbane and surrounding areas. Pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and recognise their long custodianship of the lands we are on today, and also extend that respect to any Indigenous peoples in the audience today. We'll get to it at the end, but part of our work now is thinking about how we kind of include Indigenous epistemologies and ways of knowing and thinking to better kind of manage our land in more sustainable ways. So that's something I'm really excited about, and I hope we can build on together as a collective. I'd also like to acknowledge the various co-authors or collaborators that I'll touch on throughout today. I'm going to run through why we would consider inclusivity as part of an innovation process. I'm going to throw inclusivity into a bucket or a portfolio of activities that are to encourage a kind of more responsible approach to innovation. I'm going to get you to think about what the role of diverse stakeholders are, and then give 3 examples, which is probably the most exciting bit, of how we've included kind of different people and their backgrounds as part of digitalisation of agriculture projects within Australia. I'm going to end with a little bit note of caution and then wrap things up. So why we need to consider inclusivity in innovation processes. Traditionally, innovation processes have been rather secretive. When we think about intellectual property legislation protected by patents, caution over sharing private information is rife, particularly in the Australian agricultural sector, and that's a real concern out there that is argued to be preventing the adoption of digital technologies. Because of this kind of power asymmetry, whereby private organisations and big tech in particular are seen to kind of gain from a change in how data and information are shared across the value chain. So increasingly, the secretive innovation processes are inadequate to address grand challenges. We've had the pandemic and saw how quickly things could be mobilised to change how we did things. Climate change is ongoing and requires a lot of effort, amongst various other kind of chaotic disruptions facing modern societies. So the role of inclusivity, including more diverse stakeholders and their thoughts meaningfully within innovation processes, is good. It makes economic sense. The research around firms with more inclusive teams, more diverse teams, is that they outperform those with less diverse teams. Provides an input for various ways of being and knowing, social inclusion, and it helps kind of air concerns that we may not have thought about, or broaden out the kind of systems that we're thinking about. So arguably, as kind of the mandate for organisations increases to be less about kind of specifically what one institution does and more about how they collaborate within an innovation system or ecosystem, it's important to think about what private organisations' roles are within kind of this collaborative arrangement. So inclusivity is one part of it, and the other panel members will get into that later. But in our work, we've kind of framed what we do in terms of responsible innovation and the 4 dimensions of responsible innovation, each of which have kind of activities that encourage us to think about these dimensions. So responsible innovation means taking care of the future through collective stewardship of science and innovation in the present. By anticipating the results of what our actions today are going to create in terms of impact, by including diverse stakeholders and ideas, by being reflexive so that we think about why we're doing what we're doing all the time, monitoring our ambition for change, and being responsive, kind of having the space to pivot. So diverse stakeholders within these innovation processes bring arguably more complicated ideas and methods that need to be hashed out. So national, sectoral, organisational, international stakeholders and their shared cultures are dealing with a transition from the innovation systems and processes of today to the responsibilities and innovation systems into the future. So a recently accepted paper kind of argues this point in response to mission-oriented innovation and how the missions, particularly within our organisation of CSIRO, are looking to catalyse collaborative research partnerships so that the sum is bigger than the parts. So digitalisation, we've used that as an opportunity to build more inclusive agricultural innovation processes. What that means is we've got digital technologies that we're developing as an organisation, apps, web interfaces, Internet of Things, technologies, sensors, etc. But we're involving Australian research and development organisations and diverse networks of stakeholders in the development process, so that we all kind of invest in some way, time, money, other, to develop, deploy, use, and then obtain value from such development processes. So I'm going to give you 3 examples now, one of which is this app called 1622 Water Quality, led by Peter Thorburn, who is a colleague and friend who's around at TropAg, so if you see him, you can hit him up about it. But this involved me as a social scientist sitting in with human-centred designers on a project team to develop a technology. So there was a kind of combination of water quality monitoring sensors, contributing data in near real time to an application interface that farmers could then access if they had the password for those sensors, in an effort to show them what nitrogen levels were doing in their adjacent streams. So the hope there is that seeing that in real time allows them to see a previously invisible chemical that they might apply, so nitrogen fertiliser applied to the field, run off into the Great Barrier Reef lagoon. So that's one. The next one is a hybrid responsible ag tech conference. So in the middle of COVID, we won some money from the CSIRO research office to run a responsible ag tech symposium. We had representation from all Australian states and territories. At least 15 countries from five continents were represented. And this kind of was an effort to bring science, research, industry, both old ag and new kind of ag tech startup world together to discuss kind of a pathway forward. So I'm going to show you a little video, and then after this one, I'll go to the third one. So there's normally music, but I can fill you in on what's going on here. People are talking. Diverse people are talking. People with different ideas are talking. So the big thing that we're trying to do here is encourage collaboration between previously potentially antagonistic private organisations and get them to think about what the implications of the technological development processes they're involved in are, and how they can collaborate with other organisations to maximise the kind of social benefits, or at least consider potential social issues. So this bit is Tora's explaining how kind of Indigenous worldviews can inform how we go about doing these innovation processes, and is part of that, bringing Indigenous epistemologies into that research and development process. So that's that. The final one, climate services for agriculture. This is a relatively new one compared to the others. So in the last 2 years, we've been working on developing this digital technology, again with a group of designers, various scientific expertise, and ourselves. And the idea behind this tool is it gives farmers a chance to look 10, 20, 30 years into the future and see kind of climate projections further out than what they're normally looking at. So part of the challenge with this one is that it's not actually a technical problem at all. It's about trying to teach people how to think about things that even for you or I, kind of 20 or 30 years into the future, are quite hard to deal with. So there's a whole kind of social understanding bit about what these projections are telling me, how it's relevant to my farm, and all the other things that might change in the meantime. So it's important as part of that development process to ask who it's for, how it fits into their workflow, their life, how it might help, and how it could be improved, and also see that as an ongoing process of development. So you're not just developing a tool and leaving it. So I think this is almost my last slide, and it's just some notes of caution to consider when investing in such collaborative innovation. So narratives and agendas are prone to capture by dominant interests. So there are definitely needs to include kind of discussions of power and privilege in such processes. Digitally enabled technologies and processes require ongoing capacity building. It's not a kind of one-off, but that capacity building is an opportunity to embed kind of inclusive or responsible innovation processes that then reinforce that as a positive kind of cultural change. And inequality and illiteracy systematically accumulate. So if nothing else from today, we've taken away diverse views meaningfully included in innovation processes can be challenging, which is kind of the point, but worth it, evaluations suggest. They're core to building the innovation systems of the future, whether you think about that at the regional, sectoral, national, international level. Again, inequality and illiteracy systemically accumulate. So Professor Henrietta's talk this morning kind of really highlights that. We've got layers and layers and layers of systemic challenges that need to be unpicked in order to kind of increase the value of thinking about things in different ways. And they require system and systems leadership. Combination of some stability and some change, and clarity, and transparency of decision making, what in the literature is referred to as strategic ambidexterity. So that's just some further reading, but I look forward to taking any clarification questions and also a question and answer session at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Simon. And thank you for introducing us to yet another concept of responsible innovation. We do have an opportunity to ask one or two clarifying questions. Keep in mind that the podium discussion afterwards will allow for a much more in-depth discussion. There are a couple of roving microphones, so if anybody has a question now to Simon, please put up your hands. If this is not the case, I can't see any hands up. Okay. Well, thanks, Simon. We'll cover most of that then in the podium discussion. I would now like to ask Alyssa, Jade, McDonald-Baertl to come to the podium. Alyssa will talk to us about co-creating sustainability, innovation in sustainable agri-food systems. And Alyssa is a board member of the CGIAR and who brings a very energetic and entrepreneurial perspective and approach to international development. She has grown up in PNG, which makes her very qualified to talk about these sorts of topics, and she brings a really strong passion for evidence-based change to the CGIAR board. She has a very strong knowledge of sustainable business management in the SME sector. Over to you, Alyssa.
Great. Thank you so much, Holger. Lovely to see you all today, colleagues. The UN FAO and the World Economic Forum wrote a paper recently, earlier this year, and they suggested, what if 1% of food-related GDP would be spent on developing innovation? Could you imagine? You wouldn't have to be looking for budgets. You wouldn't have to be spending so much time trying to drum up support. You would be spending the time thinking, what's the best way for us to spend this? And it's exactly the question that we have at the CGIAR board. What is our institutional response to delivering innovation at scale to ensure that we are responsible, sustainable, and also inclusive by nature? Certainly in our mind, we believe the money is coming. We know the change is emerging. And our job institutionally is to see how can we organize ourselves in the best way so the best scientists can go forth and do their important job. You know this. We've had this job for decades. Yet we've marginally improved our productivity, yet we've also had these unintended consequences regarding our emissions, regarding livelihoods, and regarding climate. So not only is it the job of the past to do more with this innovation budget, but also to ensure that we're improving climate and livelihoods along the way. Don't you think it's a little bit interesting that our sector, different to mobility, energy, transport, we actually can be part of the solution by the nature of what we do? It's very meta. And I think somewhere in here, as an institutional response from the CGIAR, we hold this at heart. We are sitting on both the problem and the answer. So it's really, how do we organize ourselves that we can unleash and foster that environment within? This is it. No longer are we silos of thinking there's policy here and a crop there and perhaps water here and organization there. None of the projects that we are all working on are ever individuals or processes or methods. It's the combination of this. And this is what I loved about what the UN, FAO, and the World Economic Forum paper suggested. It suggested innovation doesn't occur in a petri dish, and it doesn't occur in isolation in a particular country. It occurs as a bundle. Our multiple technologies, processes, and people and places come together to form innovations en masse. So what is the environment to foster that? Scaling technologies for innovation? Or is it about fostering systems transformation? My colleagues at the CGIAR System Board, this is what we spend our days and nights on thinking. On one side, we are listening to our scientists to hear what are the emerging trends and what are the inequalities that are inherent within them. And secondly, we're looking at what should the goals be that we should be stimulating and making enabling factors for. Let's have a look at the first one, addressing the emerging needs. Perhaps you have seen we have some new research agendas that we've recently put out. Perhaps you're partners with us already. One of them I particularly love is about gender inequality. It's a program that ACR have been pushing us for many, many years to work on, and we're very grateful here in Brisbane to be able to report some of the steps. But as you know, gender and social inequalities are deeply entrenched within our global agri-food systems. It's these structural gender inequalities like harmful norms, unequal responsibilities, and restrictive masculinities that make women particularly vulnerable to shocks and stresses like climate change, conflict, state fragility, and our most recent pandemic. Although gender transformative approaches mitigate some of these inequalities, there are substantial ones that still persist. It is our belief at the CGIAR that social technical innovations which target both climate resilience not only have to be bundled and brought together to be encouraged to be uptaken by women, but they also have to be diffused at a scale to achieve this systems transformation that we are looking for. We all know that social protection systems often fail to address the constraints faced by many women and agri-food systems in structures. I grew up in one of those in Papua New Guinea directly. I think many of us have lived that experience as well. More research is needed to address how these constraints can transform agri-food systems to both reduce inequality and also be women part of the co-creation and the developing of solutions which most crucially impact their own livelihoods and daughters, like the two that I have. We have big goals. When we think about fostering systems transformation, we think multi-region, we think multi-country, we think in millions. And we don't just see women as a gender, but we see its access to business opportunities, to entrepreneurialism. We see it as what is the relationship to empowered women and what does that mean for land? Everybody is a stakeholder when we address these systems at the transformational aspect. Very much what our colleague Simon here in his last sentence even referenced with the ambidexterity. how we can have the and situation, not just the or. I would like to just mention, to achieve those big impact goals that we have to work with a lot of organizations, because that's where the knowledge is, and that's where the capacity and the enablement comes from. This is just the high-level list of partners that we work with on the Gender Inequality Program. That's huge, isn't it? Thus, what we are asking always from a board perspective, how can we enable this environment for our teams to be able to work together from private, public enterprises, farmer networks, NGOs, religious and organizations groups, agricultural ministries, and more importantly, finance ministries and investors? How does everybody else see themselves with a place here? And how does that cross crops, water, policy, technology, and emerging aspects that we don't even understand yet, like artificial intelligence and climate justice? Perhaps you'll see Juan Lucas walking around in the next days, and if you're interested in partnership and working with us on some of these big projects, we gladly welcome you. We have a way now that we would love to be able to engage, like I mentioned, everything from small farmer groups to large-scale investors. It's all with one lens. We have an open door, and we really need everybody to be part of this process so we can achieve that systems-level transformation. Look out for Juan Lucas, he's open for business. Our second topic here is about stimulating goal-driven activity. So GHG emissions are occurring, as we know, from our agri-food systems. And we know that we need to ensure low emission development doesn't actually threaten food production, that financial flows are consistent sometimes when we deal with climate-sensitive responses. A traditional concern of the low and middle income countries is that climate-friendly development could threaten further food security and poverty and livelihoods. But what we need to do is recognize these concerns, and through a new initiative that we've also recently launched, Mitigate, where it relates to low emissions agriculture, we aim to support partner nations to achieve climate-friendly food system development with emissions reductions and without the unwanted trade-offs. And I think you get the feeling now we're ambitious. Yes, we're ambitious. We need to work across the system to make this happen. We look to reduce the global greenhouse gas and emissions through targeted, research-based action in 7 countries that are typically high emission producers. No, we're not going to start in the easy places. If we're going to do it, let's go to the difficult places. This is the work that includes supporting national development on one side and planning for food systems on the other side. Essentially here, closing the information gaps so countries can set up and attain emission reduction targets through piloting with living labs on site where local food system actors are engaging and participating in the research. They're testing and informing us what needs to happen. It is through the Mitigate Plus team we will also be doing this on global engagement and agenda setting, which is where we need to hear your examples and how you're also achieving this. Big goals. It's a big issue. To generate more impactful and demand-driven knowledge, our goal is to be really place-based. No, we don't have a headquarter anywhere and we don't have a central running system. Our systems transformation runs from the place, from the small farm that I grew up on in Papua New Guinea, through to the larger scale farms that are managed by multinationals. It is this participatory research that will focus on our stakeholders, putting them and the farmers at the center of our local food systems, and to collaboratively design, test, and deploy emission reduction strategies. We see this approach as fundamentally different to the top-down development models that maybe you have associated our organization with in the past, and where we see solutions to be designed and delivered with brilliant participation from the intended beneficiaries from the very beginning. Let me just reiterate on that last bit. Maybe you know the CG from the past. Maybe we didn't answer your mails. Maybe we rejected a proposal we sent through. Maybe you've applied for some jobs with us in the past and maybe it wasn't the most comfortable environment. I can tell you here on behalf of all of our colleagues, we are open for business and we would love to work with you. And we are transforming ourselves so you can come and be part of this We were very siloed in the past, and what I don't promise you is that it's perfect tomorrow. But I can promise you there are 9,000 scientists all running with big ideas, and what we are just trying to do from a board perspective is reduce those barriers. A perfect example of that is some of our most treasured funders and partners are here in Brisbane for the next 2 days to help us look at what those barriers are and how they can also help move through. It's about reducing barriers, and it's about systems transformation. You know, another example that I'm very, very excited about, especially here standing in Australia, is the ASEAN strategy. Perhaps you didn't know, but CGIAR is also interested working regionally. And I've seen many of your presentations in the last days and how all sorts of regional opportunities are popping up around the Pacific, around parts of ASEAN, parts of West Africa, parts of Latin America. And we also are organising ourselves so we can hear you at this level. Jean Bailey, who is the DG of IRI, was recently approached by the ASEAN member states to say, hey, CG, if you're so fantastic in organising yourself on systems transformation, what can you do for us on our massive region? And we've been working very hard. Jean and his team have done 700 consultations within 4 months, from farmer groups to national ministries, multinationals to NGOs, to understand, what do you need here in these 10 beautiful countries? What are you hungry for? And what are you hungry to participate in? This is a super exciting program, which is my personal favourite regional development in the whole world right now. We've found, many of you know the science, that sometimes it's the degree of diversity between players that makes the spark happen. And the ASEAN development strategy from Jean and the team is perfectly doing this. I don't know how they manage to do it, but they get all sorts of groups together that are communicating with different languages because they come from crop science, or they come from finance, or because they come from a religious orientation, or because they're just hungry. It is having all of these players at the table that can give us those diverse opinions so we can co-create what they mean. Look at this fantastic list. This is currently what the CG and ASEAN member state contributors are looking at. Don't you see some interesting ideas in there that you wouldn't typically be seen in a standard list? We've got finance topics. We've got hunger topics, we've got circularity, we've got old issues and we've got new issues. And this is what that degree of diversity through the engagement has produced. Jean Bailey also is here walking around for the next few days. If you have something to contribute, he would love to hear from you. We have confidence in the confluence. I mean, many of us have studied the issues around negative externalities. What does that come from? Often blinkers. That's why we need this systems approach, and that's why we invite you to the table. We genuinely believe that through locally scaled practices and co-created innovation bundles, we can mitigate those and also solve some of these big issues. And perhaps in that way, we would be a trusted partner for the 1% of food-related GDP that could be spent on innovation. And when I say we, I mean the collective we in the sector that is working on this. The Commission on Sustainable Intensification told us that we're a long way from that lucky number. There's a gap. There's a gap between the investment that is needed to work on this innovation and the money that you're sitting on in your own projects right now. Between now and 2030, we need an additional $4 billion for R&D and $6.5 billion for the uptake of climate-smart technologies. We need another $4.7 billion in water technology and management. What this would do would lead to reduced food prices that benefit the poorest rural and urban consumers, with projected price drops in staple foods in the order of 25% by 2030 and 40% in 2050. It must sound crazy in the day of today, where we all know the rising of food prices, that we can make these predictions. And isn't it now more than ever we have to double down and deliver on that? We believe that investment in this area will reduce the need for food imports, which, and the absence of substantial investment, is going to increase in the opportunities for countries to become more self-sufficient. Again, another lesson that the issue in Ukraine and Russia has taught us to be very thoughtful about. So how can we get some of this money in the door? Of course, we've got foreign aid-oriented donors that have typically supported our work in the past, but there are new entrants. I love this example from the World Fish Centre, where public-private partnerships were brought together to essentially enable the improved farmed tilapia hatchery to occur in Timor-Leste, one of the world's newest countries, to benefit from high-quality science and also innovative financing. There's a chance for everybody. What I love here with this approach is it started off with classic R&D from aid-oriented GASH. It moved through to delivering technical expertise and then private partnerships to be able to see it through. This is a model on how we can ensure we can go to market with our innovations. This helps us close the gap and it helps us invite more of that money to the table that we need to solve those goals. By the way, Essam Mohammed, DG of World Fish, is also here in the next days. If you have something to contribute around these areas, he would love to hear from you. In the fish topic alone, we have big numbers to work on. 800 million people are working in small-scale fisheries. We are expecting 204 million tonnes of food production to come out of our waters and about $24 trillion worth of business sitting inside the water. How we cooperate, how we invite the entire value chain to participate in here is something that we are thinking a lot at. That's us, the 1CG System Board. We have all our hearts forward and we are listening very carefully on what you can tell us on how we can reduce these barriers and also what you need to move forward. We are people and approachable. We don't sit in a headquarter, we are constantly on the move, and we've often got soil in our shoes and dirt under our fingernails to understand what the structural things are that are holding you back. Your job is to do brilliant science, and our job is to enable you to do it. We'd like to understand concretely what your wishes are. This is what we're working on at the moment. This is what we're talking to our funders in the next 2 days about. Help us further if you like. And part of that is to know that we're a big, big team. These are just some of the faces that are here in the next days. I mentioned earlier our ASEAN strategy with Jean Bailey, our partnerships and advocacy strategy with Juan Lucas Restrepo, aquatic foods with Essam Mohammed and sustainable financing. We've got Lindiwe Sibanda, we've got Marco Ferroni, we've got the phenomenal Claudia Sadoff that you will hear from later today together with ACR. Tell us what you need. Tell us what you've got to offer, because we'd love to do a deal. Thank you very much.
Are there any clarifying questions to Alyssa at this stage? So thank you so much for sort of setting the scene for the CGIAR and what the board is doing and the hard work that the board is doing as part of that reform process. We now shift the focus, and I would like to introduce Dr. Melinda Moata, who is a senior lecturer at the Kupang State Agricultural Polytech in Indonesia. She holds a PhD in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management from the University of Adelaide, and she specializes in circular economy modeling, dryland system management, soil science, agroforestry, and climate-smart agriculture. Melinda also founded the Climate Smart Agriculture Consortium together with Adelaide University and the Crawford Fund, and the Indonesian government and several NGOs. I'm looking forward to hearing more details from you, Melinda.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. This is my honor to be here among the so wonderful women and then board of the CGIAR from Germany, South Australia, from Australia, and among all the experienced people here. So I'm Melinda. I will like to talk about the efficiency of inclusive partnership in agriculture, international development, innovation in limited resources areas. So I'm working as a lecturer, senior lecturer and researcher in the State Agricultural Polytechnic in Kupang. So why I work with partnerships and collaboration, my background is I studied in Hawaii for my master's and then continued to do my PhD in Adelaide, and then also have a training in Netherlands for vocational school training. And then 2020, I joined as a fellow for the Mariel William Fellowship Program from ACR. So this is really support me to become a collaborator. So I have additional job as a collaborator since 2020 to 2024 in my institution. So today I would like to share about my experience and then my work with the smallholder farmer in Indonesia. So I will say about the background about SDGs and inclusive partnerships and women in agriculture. So why we have to work in agriculture? Because of SDG second is about how reduce or zero hunger. So Indonesia, even though in category 2.5 to 4.9%, but compared to the population in Indonesia, 700 million people, and it's about 3 to 6 million people still hunger. So especially in my province, we still hear that about the stunting problem in Indonesia still high. The data from UNICEF 2019 reported that Indonesia in the category of very high stunting problem is more than 30%. And East Nusa Tenggara or Nusa Tenggara Timur is one of 34 provinces in Indonesia. Put a high number, it's about 20 to 20.99% stunting problem in Indonesia. And then we are still the third ranking of the poorest province in Indonesia. So this is really support us to think deeply about how we manage the agriculture to feed our people in the limited resources area. And then the UNICEF also provide a framework about the malnutrition problem. So one of the causes of the malnutrition is household food insecurity. So that's why to be able to survive for the food resilient systems, there is a framework from Tyndall 2015 reported that we have prevention action and also reactive action for food system resilience. And if we have disturbance or shocks, some people can be more resilient, they can be adapted to the shocks or disturbance, but some people, if they're less resilient, they will not be able to increase the capacity to be able to keep in the resilient systems. That's why we think about the social capital or partnership can empower people to be more resilient for the food resilient systems. And talking about the agribusiness systems in Indonesia, so there are some players in agribusiness systems. We know that there are some middlemen, retailer market, supermarket, agency, and distributors play at the beginning of the agricultural system. And the end, there are support system also related to the financial, insurance, research center, education, extension, consultant, and any other players that really important and play important role in agricultural systems in Indonesia. So those can be like a candidate for the partnership for agricultural system in Indonesia. So talking about the inclusive partnership in agriculture, we believe that we have to have a strong cooperations between academy, industry, government to solve many kind of issues in the community and industry and global challenges, including the sharing of resources, risk, and benefits. So from that one, we have to be able to produce a business model that can help people to be survive or to be sustained for their livelihood. Like they have to be able to produce a service or products and can be sold by micro, small, medium enterprises. And we propose the hexahelix collaborations. Before, like people focus on triple helix collaboration as a PPP, but we will propose for the hexahelix collaboration, which is academic, industry, government, community, media, and NGOs. So as MAN 2019 say that partnership and collaborative initiative is unique in every location and membership and area of the concern. So that's why we want to more focus on our region is Nusa Tenggara Timur that has limited resources. So the first step that we have to do, I joined in Merrill Williams Leadership Program from Asia 2020 and 2022 from, until now. So it is really empower women leadership in agriculture because we consist of different countries, 6 countries, and then 20 fellows that connect each other from different institutions and really help us to empower us in agriculture systems. And then we also have a collaboration with university in Netherlands. So we have tailor-made training and with among stakeholders like smallholder farmers and then extension worker and also with the government, NGOs, and then for the farmers, we have a training together and we empower people to be able to be a leader for their group in their workplace. So this is 2019 and 2020. And then we have also some projects in Yogyakarta. We empower also the frontline farmers. We're giving them training, training of trainers for the farmers, leaders, and they have to be able to teach or empower local farmers. It's about 7,000 farmers under their group. So they have 20 team leaders. So we need teach team leaders, and they will spread the knowledge to the 6,000 farmers. So this is an example of collaboration with the government and NGO and industry. They have organic products, sugar, coconut sugar that export to the other countries. So this is kind of the partnership that we have built. Like, because we are in living in the limited areas, it's not prevent us to do something. This is my really challenge when I graduated from the standard university and good university with high technology, but I have to work and be able to help people in the poor country, poor province that have limited resources. But we can overcome that problem by strengthening partnerships. So we have built since 2020 to 2029, until now we have about 150 partnerships, hexahelix collaborations. So we just started to have a collaboration with Timor-Leste government, Minister Agriculture and Fishery Minister. And then we have also a partnership with Indonesian province government, and then district government, sub-district government with any other academic, include in Indonesia and also outside of Indonesia, international. And then we have also a research funding by ISF Asia. We found that talking about gender, because the CGIAR has a topic, 3 main topics focus on about women, and then about young people, and then about the agriculture. So we have key domains for empowering women in agriculture. And we have a small research about that. And we found that in related to the land use in my province, most of them, 82% are land self-owner, but the land is a very small land, lower than 1 hectare and 1 to 2 hectares. And mostly husband or male play main role, 80% in the agricultural process. So we can see here that the men play a role in the land preparation, fertilizer, seedling, maintenance, but the woman or female play important role for harvesting and marketing. It shows us that we need to empower women for the agricultural processes, for the land preparation until maintenance, but also keep them in the ability for the harvesting and then marketing. And then for the productive resources, they have also some social capitals group that really help them for the agricultural systems. So we can see here that cooperative or bank, like the presenter before say that financial resources funding, pound shop, and a group of farmers is the institution that plays important role for keeping small farmer to be able to do in their agricultural system. So we found 8 main institutions in their agricultural systems. And for the use of income, male has more income than female, And then for the human capital or education, they are pretty similar. So the data from BPS 2020 also provide the information that they are equal in education, but most of them, or most of us, are in the elementary school for the farmers. For the access to technology, only 33% can be able to access for the technology, and mostly men has more access to the technology, include tractor for soil tillage, cultivation, fertilizer, pest control, and harvesting. But female, and they play technology in the marketing. So they do promoting and then selling product using like online technology. They have also similar informal education, so female and male has also similar education in informal, like trainings, and mostly about the agriculture and then waterland management. But for the activities beside the agriculture, men has about eight types of activities beside agriculture. So men has another job to do besides agriculture practices in their field. But for the female has more activities beside the agriculture system. It gives us a big picture that a female plays many things in their household and then in their agriculture systems. And they also face lots of challenges compared to the men in the field. So include, because we have limited labor in agriculture, so female, even though they are still sick, but they have to help their husband to work in the field. So keep working although sick due to limited labor, human labor. So that's why we can find that there are some potential for building up the community, like cooperative bank and pawn shop, government and donors to provide business model to empower women in agriculture. In another study from the ARSF Asia funding, we found that during the crisis pandemic, last 2020 until now, there are some changes on demand and price in agriculture, the decreasing of demand and then price in agriculture products. And the COVID-19 had impact to the local farmer or local people in my province in Nusa Tenggara Timur, and mainly will impact to the lower income and then less of consumption for the product selling or product markets. And how they have done to solve their problem. Most of them are borrowing money from the source of funding, pawn shop, or they selling the pound their things or goods in the pawn shop, or borrow some money from the family or any other agency. But also in some agency, they have created a new job and then work more harder. So this is, like I mentioned before, like every region have specific things that can be done by cooperative with any other institution. So we can see here that how they overcome the problem during the crisis. So they borrow the money, create new jobs, and then work more harder than before. And for the food resilience systems in city and rural areas, most of them are doing home gardening during the pandemic, and reduce the food consumption and reduce the frequency of eating. Like before, like 3 times eating per day. During the time of crisis, they're just eating maybe once or 2 times a day. And then they just will focus on the staple food, like carbo, to eat every day during the crisis. And then for social capital, we found that the most important social capital that can help them to empower them during the crisis is from cooperative, government, and arisan is informal micro savings from the bank and from the family. So those is a institution that we have to empower them, especially for the women during the crisis. So this is the framework that we have built from the study. Like if you have crisis in the limited resources area, we have to handle the risk, the crisis, while we have to make sure that there is food security for the family by empowering the social capital groups. So some people with a more resilient system, they will have, because of they have strong social capital, but some people with less resilient because of they have less social capitals. So by empowering the institution that can help women during the crisis or do some home gardening and then local agroforestry systems. So this is about the young because we are not faced the challenge not only because of the climate change, but we also face the challenge due to the interest of agriculture for the young men. So the things that we have done, because we are working in the university, we empower them by like promote them using the media. So we have lots of experience. We just giving the chance to promote their things, their entrepreneurships, young entrepreneur in their field, like in the fisheries or in the horticulture or in the food crop systems. It will be able them to have good access to the government, to the NGOs, to the industry, and then now they grow up with their entrepreneurship. So this is like why we put media in one of the chains in hexahelix collaborations. So this is the capitals that play in the agricultural sustainable development. So this is the model that we have developed for the rural development and sustainable dryland ecosystems. So we have some vulnerability about less participation of youth, land use change, and climate change. But we have lots of capitals that can be empowered to help to overcome the vulnerability context. And then we have also government and some other sectors, culture, media, and academic to help livelihoods to produce the livelihood strategies for the local farmer, and we will make sure that they have a livelihood outcomes like increase more income, increase well-being, and sustainable in ecosystem or improve food security. So this is the model that we propose. We propose for the agro-eco-tourism, so combination between agro, ecology, edu, and then tourism. We work with hexahelix collaborations, and as a conclusion, I cite for the May 2019 that communities with high levels of persisting social capital are oftentimes the hubs for emerging collaborative partnerships, and we found that. So people in a community with more social capital will be able to be resilient in the sustainable agriculture. So those are the parties that play important roles for the smallholder farmers, and the business model that we propose is agro, eco, edu, tourism, which is multifunctional farming system, not only for subsistence, for the food, but also for education, for tourism, and for ecology. Thank you so much for your attention. I would like to, I would like to thank you for the Mary William Fellowship Program Asia, and then UNI, University of New England, RSA funding, TMT, OKP Novik, Van Halarenstein, Netherlands, local government, and Polytechnic Kupang. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melinda, and thank you for giving us a really interesting perspective on how important it is to understand the local circumstances in order to develop those new business models that you talked about, and the importance of building that social capital. Are there clarifying questions for Melinda at this stage? I can't see any hands going up, in which case we move to our final presentation for today, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Nompumelelo Obokoh, who is also the vice chair of the ISDC. Pumi, as she's known, has recently been appointed to the new CEO of the South African Council for Natural Scientific Professions, so congratulations to that appointment. She has a PhD in plant biotechnology from the Institute of Biotechnology, University of Cambridge. She is also the current chairperson of the board of the National Research Foundation, as well as the CEO of the South African Council for Natural Scientific Professions, and serves as an independent non-executive director on Fruit South Africa.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Pumi.
Now, thank you very much, Holger, for the introduction, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to present on the Inclusive Partnership for One CGIAR. And I thought that perhaps just to give some context or background, just to share that in 2021, the ISDC published a discussion brief entitled Incubating Innovation, a One CGIAR Culture and Mindset. This brief really highlighted some of the key interesting opportunities to boost inclusivity through internal capacity building, strategic engagement in partnership networks, and results-based investment. So now we're building on from this work, and we're in the process of finalizing a very comprehensive technical note that will explore at a deeper level the significance of inclusive innovation for CGIAR's progress in the 5 impact areas that are outlined in the 2030 Research and Innovation Strategy, and for its comparative advantage within the global innovation ecosystem. So having said that, and really looking at the work that we're proposing, what triggered this work is that there has been a growing expectations and voices amongst key stakeholders for CGIAR to embrace more fully an inclusive mindset and practices. Therefore, as ISDC, we see this as an excellent opportunity to enhance the relevance, scientific credibility, legitimacy, as well as the effectiveness of CGIAR's engaged research by integrating diverse stakeholder knowledge, insights, and leadership. So this technical note that we are putting together, though is still at the consultation stage, it also recognizes the important work that the CGIAR has put together and the investment in terms of the strategy on engagement and partnerships. And we want to use this platform and this avenue to further build on the work that we have started on the technical note, and we believe that through the engagements today and also later on as we engage with the System Council, we'll be able to get further insight as to how we can further enhance this technical note that looks at inclusive innovation. The ISDC's work, again, is on this topic, is motivated by the potential of inclusive models to generate context-specific innovation under increasing agri-food system volatility and crisis, and to make more effective of CGIAR's assets. So in line with this mandate, ISDC, we are recommending and also emphasizing actions that can be taken through the CGIAR's formal institutional mechanisms, whilst also recognizing the role of informal and semi-informal partners in the innovation ecosystem. So I wanted to put this particular slide just to show that although today we are looking comprehensively at the inclusive innovation, my presentation will zoom into the partnership. What are the frameworks? What are the models that we are coming with from this technical note? In terms of the methodology that we've embarked on, we've used really a structured compilation, objective review, and synthesis of recent literature which is relevant to inclusive innovation, which emphasizes on nutrition, poverty, gender, climate, and environment. And these sources included literature which has been previously compiled by the ISDC, documentation of existing and ongoing work within the CGIAR, and we also looked at various publications and other resources which we've identified through expert consultations. And importantly, we looked at the internet for articles in peer-reviewed and popular journals, as well as recent publications, including the grey literature. Furthermore, we were able to use expert consultations, which provided really insights regarding the range of inclusive innovation concepts and practices amongst a discrete set of CGIAR researchers and partners. So the final note, really, we hope that through this engagement at the TropAg Symposium, as well as I indicated earlier, the engagement with the System Council in a few days, will really help us really to strengthen and ensure that we have a comprehensive, recommendations and advice that we can then provide to the CG leadership. So through the note and as ISDC, we encourage the CG's leadership to create a very robust roadmap for increasing inclusivity across 4 arenas, which we have identified as embracing institutional change, navigating trade-offs, pursuing inclusive and effective partnerships, and most importantly, measuring some of the gains from inclusive innovation. So ISDC sees this anatomy on inclusive innovation to address these 4 key arenas that will be underpinned by an enabling environment to disrupt and rebuild, test and invest in order to deliver a transformational change or impact, and therefore accelerate the transformation of food, land, and water systems in a climate crisis. And furthermore, looking at the next slide, zooming really into at the institutional level, what we have found through the work that we have undertaken is that institutional change can encourage mindset and behavioral shifts that enables inclusive innovation by promoting self-reflective analysis and skill building amongst our researchers, and by setting expectations for participatory models within multidisciplinary research teams. So in this case, ISDC is encouraging the CG's leadership to pursue innovation at multiple levels, really inculcating a culture of inclusion at all levels. And this really inculcates also embracing incremental innovation within the CG's institutional processes, the practices and partnerships, while contributing to transformative innovation within the agri-food systems. So in looking at inclusive innovation, ISDC is recommending an intentional learning while doing agenda rather than a prescriptive approach. So through structured implementation and experimentation with inclusive innovation models and new institutional narratives, the CG can really play a leading role in inclusive, science-based agri-food system transformation. Now looking at trade-offs, who wins or who loses? There are a number of frameworks and strategies for navigating trade-offs which have been developed in recent decades to steer towards more inclusive innovation models and account for the complexity and dynamism of the agri-food systems. And these strategies really, emphasizes integrating stakeholder diversity and dynamism and transparent acknowledgement of winners and losers into trade-off analysis and deliberations, which can therefore be enhanced by combining intervention evaluation with system-level modeling and expanded institutional capabilities. Now zooming into this very important aspect of the 4 enablers or these arenas is partnerships, really looking at how then CGIAR can effectively and inclusively interface with the world. So what we have seen as we embark on this exercise is that, yes, we understand and we acknowledge an expanding research scope for CGIAR and the impressive achievements of the Green Revolution that delivered much needed food calories to millions of people, but subsequent decades have also shown that they've revealed limitations of steering these singular technologies into complex local agri-food systems across the world. So the research portfolio within the CG over the 50-year history has also evolved from a primary emphasis on production technologies, that is improved seeds and farm practices for staple crops, to a more complex and expansive portfolio that today encompasses environmental sustainability, rural resilience, nutrition, social and institutional change. For example, as we've seen earlier in some other presentation, empowerment of women and youth, inclusion of indigenous knowledge, land tenure, and pro-poor policies. And since the advent of the CG's research programs, partnerships have really grown in importance, both right from the design phase, the conducting of the research, the implementation phase, as well as scaling up research outputs. Now, as we embark on this particular work as ISDC, we identified a number of strategies and approaches which we want to put forward for advancing inclusive innovation within the CGIAR. And this covers accessing, functioning of network-based partnerships, including knowledge, creation and exchange, institutional collaboration, and capacity for local differentiation and public-private partnerships, including how they operate and their influence on innovation systems. And the second one is on investing in higher quality partnerships, really looking at, and paying attention in partnering processes, right from the identification of the partners, effective facilitation of those partnerships, dedicated support and linkages to broader development efforts, as well as performance assessment. We are also looking at strategies to increase the duration, early stage engagement, and for example, beyond short-term project cycles, and also the scope looking at beyond market development or farmer participation in small plot trials. And for this partnership, we want to see the scaling beyond a niche level. So at the outset, public-private partnerships will really be ideal and be based on clear-eyed assessment of what is really required to achieve sustained, equitable benefits, as well as the actual latent demand for commercially delivered outputs and services, and the cost effectiveness of any required public or philanthropic subsidy. So as ISDC, so embarking on this work, there were quite a number of reflections which we thought we could advance as part of this technical brief, and these may also apply equally in other contexts. Some of the questions that came through was how do institutional partnership practices in your context test and advance inclusive innovation? And another question, for example, will be how and which new ways of working with partners can one adopt to better reach and really react to the groups of the most marginalized in agri-food system decision making? And having said that, and looking at all these various arenas that I've presented today, the most important one, of course, will be the measurement, evidence-based, a source of learning. Here, looking at measuring that impact, measuring the gains through inclusive innovation. What we have also identified is that measuring inclusive innovation faces a number of perennial challenges because there will be, of course, some gaps, and also there will be obstacles which are related to applying monitoring, evaluation, and learning methods to integrated systems research. So now we see that there are new measurements approaches that are emerging, and recent institutional criteria increasingly aligns with inclusive approaches to innovation. So accordingly, CGIAR, the monitoring, evaluation, and learning practices can move towards the following practices that we want to also elevate. Number one will be to use more holistic, complexity-aware approaches to assess CG's contributions to transformative innovation systems, including measuring network functions, and some of the examples will be participant heterogeneity, as well as interaction intensity. Furthermore, there are other questions that we've also identified which will also help from a measurement perspective. How then do we identify groups to be actively included, and how and where should boundaries be drawn? Which government practices should be used, and how should CGIAR researchers really position themselves within partnerships and co-creation or co-innovation processes. This is really looking at what are their comparative advantage. And another question that we looked at was what benefits that will result from inclusive innovation practices, when and to whom do they accrue? With that, really, in conclusion, what we are proposing as well as the CG, for the CG and as ISDC, is that the CG leadership really needs to create a robust roadmap for increasing inclusivity across several arenas that we've talked about. For example, navigating trade-offs, pursuing an inclusive and effective partnerships, embracing institutional change, measuring and learning. Really, what are the learnings from this work on inclusive innovation for the CG? Therefore, to strengthen the CGIAR's delivery of results in its 5 key defined impact areas, ISDC advises applying the following general approaches. Firstly, to disrupt and rebuild. Start right now to disrupt those assumptions that inhibits authentic participatory engagement, then rebuild by really crafting new initiatives that recognizes and integrate stakeholder diversity and dynamism. Also examine and define CG's comparative advantage in demand-led, integrative and transdisciplinary research. Thus, CG can attract a broad range of experts to its research partnerships. Most systematically, assessment of inclusivity within the current partnerships can also reveal new collaboration strategies that can invigorate transformative and equitable innovation. The second will be to test and measure. Here we want to test institutional reforms that promote reflexivity and inclusive models for research teams and projects, which are then grounded in well-informed theories of change. CGIAR can experiment with new incentive structures that steers researchers towards analysis and communication of agri-food systems, trade-offs, as well as encourage trust-based co-innovation that balances multiple stakeholder objectives. And over time, CGIAR's research measurement system can therefore be more fully can more fully embody a holistic, complexity-aware approach to assessing the CG's contribution to transformative innovation, including local innovation systems that have better functioning networks, more robust infrastructure, and have more empowered participants. And lastly, we look at investing and delivery. Here really to bolster CGIAR's ability to dynamically invest based on measured results for how to better reach those who are being left behind in the current and future agri-food systems and transitions. Therefore, to deliver transformative impact in partnership with host government and other agri-food system actors. CGIAR really can model inclusive co-creation through pooled funding and adaptive programming. So what we have seen is that through the One CGIAR initiative, which are supported through pooled financing, these are really a springboard to investing in inclusive innovation. So with that, I would like to really thank the ISD Council members who are here, and also through the leadership of our ISDC chair, Professor Holger Meinke, and also to recognize the lead of this particular work stream, Professor Fatin Abera, and also all the members for their insightful contribution to this technical note, which is really towards the completion, and we really appreciate some inputs from the audience today, as well as engagements later on with the System Council. And also just to thank the Secretariat that has helped us really, day to day behind the scenes to really put together this very important work that we want to discuss today. So thank you so much, and I wanted to also recognize the indigenous community. I believe they're called the Turrbal community here in Brisbane, and I want to say, Wela Leo. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pumi. Thank you to all of our 4 speakers for very insightful presentations, but also for covering a very wide range of topics, all under that broad agenda of inclusive innovation. I hope it made it clear to people why inclusivity is such an important part for innovation to take hold. And that is probably the key lessons that we're sort of learning as the CG is undergoing its reform process, that involving the people who ultimately need to benefit from those innovations early on and in a very deliberate way is so critically important. We all sort of know that, but the question is, how do we actually do that? How do we affect that sort of inclusivity that is so urgently needed? And I thought that the 4 very diverse presentations that we saw today are an excellent starting point for that discussion that we need to have. Now, we now have a podium discussion, and I really invite questions and contributions from the audience to our 4 speakers. There are, I believe, 2 roving microphones. So please put your hands up if you have questions, and I'm glad to see that there's already a corner with hands going up. There's a question right here in the front, please.
Hi, I'm Chelsea, and I guess I focus on applied climate science in agriculture with a focus on meeting the needs of end users. So this forum was really wonderful. Thank you all for your great presentations. This is a question for everybody, I guess. I was told that in order to get sort of projects internationally, in this case, Eastern Africa, we needed to get permission and work with the community leaders who are predominantly older men. So I'm just wondering, how do we move past this so that we can pursue inclusive innovation in our projects if in order to get those projects we actually are limited in who we can meet with?
Thank you very much for that question. Does anybody on the panel care to answer that? Pumi, you might be well placed. Just talk.
Oh, all right. No, thank you. Yes, okay, there we go, technology. No, thank you very much for that question, really coming from Africa. Yes, it can be that, those are some of the barriers that one can encounter, but what we have seen is that especially, well, in Southern Africa, I can speak to that through government initiatives, which are quite a lot, at the provincial level, at the local level, these are some of the initiatives or the entry points with which, as a researcher, one can utilize. And also locally, we've got quite a number of other agricultural research councils, that is the NARS, which are really also working and in an inclusive manner and also encouraging collaboration, with local partners, international partners. So really just to, as a point of encouragement, but to also look at all of these initiatives that are there in the local structures. I think that also applies in East Africa, West Africa. I've worked very much closely with various stakeholders in West Africa, for example, and it was a similar model that we really took in terms of working with the agricultural research councils, understanding what are the structures, some of the strategies that government have, and then it becomes even clearer in terms of what is it that you are contributing and how does it advance, the national agenda as well. So thank you, I hope that helps.
Thanks, Pumi. Does anybody else want to add to that topic? Okay, we take the next question. I think David and the person next to him.
Thanks very much. So Ravi I handed over to you first yesterday, so I'll take up front. So I just want to sort of pick on one thing that sort of smattered throughout each of your presentations, and that's about leadership, okay? And leadership in the context of inclusive innovation. So Simon, you sort of finished off with, and sorry, I won't be able to say this properly, strategic ambidextrality, no? Give it to me, Simon.
Yep.
And then, so Alyssa, Jade followed up, and really there were some points around fostering the environment internally, co-creating, bundling, and I'd put on the table sequencing. Melinda, a sort of a clear leader in this idea of hexahelix collaboration. And then Puma ended up with, this real need for, integrating insights that are context specific. But the message I took away was that self-reflective analysis, which sometimes leaders aren't great at. So I guess my question for all the panels to respond to is, how does leadership need to change to ensure inclusive innovation?
Thanks for that really excellent question, because I think it really goes to the heart of how we manage these transformations, and leadership is really core to that. I invite Simon to respond directly.
Yeah, I'll start. If anyone else would like to chip in, you're welcome. Thank you for a wonderfully thought out question, which is a really hard one. So I think when we're thinking about a different form of innovation, it requires a different form of leadership. I think if we look at kind of what's driving people to do things now, jobs, employment trends, it's much more around purpose and collaborative kind of outcomes, things that involve people interacting to obtain some kind of positive energy as opposed to conflict. And, no one wants to go to work and get kind of told off. So I think the whole process, and Alyssa might talk better to this, the whole process of leadership as we move into a kind of new phase in innovation system collaboration will have to be reconsidered at various levels as well.
Thanks, Simon. I'll follow up. Thanks for your question, Dave. You're a great example of this question in motion, by the way. At the ISDC earlier on the weekend, we actually came together and discussed this concept, and we heard from Simon and the CSIRO about ambidexterity, which is also a concept that the CG System Board has been looking at. We've been looking at how we have an environment at the moment that encourages stable, reliable spending of public funds for incremental innovation and improvement. That's what we've been tasked to do for the last 50 years. Yet, as Simon says, and as you hint to, it is a new world. We have new entrants that have different risk interest, we have different scientists that also want to be in an environment with fail forward. We have moonshotting, we have these other aspects where other sectors of our society have done well to punch through major goals, and this is actually what we all discussed on the weekend, was what is the environment around that. So the structure. Ambidexterity, where we have incremental and transformational innovation, is one thing that the CG System Board thinks of. And may I cheekily suggest a second one, and that is who we are. I'm really delighted to say that the CG at the moment has 41% of senior leadership are women. 35% of our professional services are also women. Women is only one nature of diversity, so please, I don't pretend to say that we are covering everything. Yet what I do want to say is, the courage that it took for our leaders to slow down hiring processes to ensure that properly the long list and the short list of candidates for leadership and senior science positions were truly diverse. Oh man, we have fire under our feet at the moment, and we have to explain that to our funders tomorrow and to you, why some of you who have been applying, you haven't heard back from us quickly, perhaps as you wished. And I am here to tell you it's because of this question about the diversity and the leadership aspect that this is only going to start with the nature of our own diversity. And we have to make some very, very bold decisions to hold up hiring, ensure we've really checked because it's not easy for everybody to apply for these opportunities. It's not easy for everybody to step into leadership roles. This is why we need places like the Crawford Fund and yourself at COSAI and other organizations to help foster these leaders to be able to come through. So when we say, hey, we've got new positions, that we have a better rank of people being willing to apply. Thank you.
I just want to add that from my perspective about leadership, because I'm joining in the ACR leadership program, Women Leadership in Agriculture, and I learned from my mentor that Dr. Rebecca said that leadership is actually listen to the people. So I'm learning a lot about how to be a good listener for the rural people. So I have a training since 2020. I apply my training skill since 2020 to now about how to become a good listener. So firstly, when I work with the smallholder farmer, the rural people, I have to listen to them. What is their problem? And then the secondly is about empower them. So it's not talk about me. I become a partner of them. I become a model of them, but I have to empower them mostly, and then to make a difference. So if you are your leader, you have to able to influence them to be better. So this is just 3 points for me. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point, Melinda, because I think this is absolutely critically important that we develop the right leadership skill, not just in the senior leaders, but throughout an organization, and make people understand that ultimately everybody is a leader, and it comes right down to self-leadership and really understanding what the mission of the organization is. So thank you for pointing that out very explicitly. Ravi.
Thank you, Holger. Thank you so much for organizing such an amazing session. And I think I was quite mesmerized by the speakers, all the 4 speakers, who gave a real picture of the evolving mindset of the CG board, or the way CG has to move, or is moving, or should be moving, that we'll see later on. But the point is, this panel showed how much women power is there, because Simon was left alone in one corner with 3 women talking of innovation, partnership, inclusiveness, and they included 1 man, fortunately. That was real inclusiveness. Now, having said that, I would say what Alyssa mentioned about the work done by Jean Ballier of IRI with the ASEAN Technical Working Group. I think that is an excellent example of CG in priority setting in the sub-region, Southeast Asia. I had been myself involved there, and I have never seen CG working with that kind of a transparent, inclusive partnership involved priority setting. There's a long way to go, but I think Jean has done a wonderful work for CG as a role model that has come up, which we need to see elsewhere. Having said that, I have a question, not on the leadership, but my question is more to make it happen what everyone here was saying in terms of inclusiveness, co-innovation, sustainability and all, is how to change the mindset of the NARS. You may have leadership, you may have innovation, co-innovation, all ideas, everything, like reducing carbon emissions, doing everything on the world, but how you change the mindset of the NARS to really make it happen in a way what we have been planning in terms of co-innovation and all, which is right now a bit theoretical. We see it coming up practically, which needs to come on the ground, though we have about 20 regional initiatives, as we learned, are already there. I don't know if they all capture what Alyssa was so much highlighting. But that mindset of NARS is one thing I would like to know how you would like to work on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ravi. Who would like to take the challenge? Alyssa?
Do you hear me? Yeah. I think because you mentioned the work of Jean Bailly and the exceptional work there done with the NAS, he would be the best one to answer. Can our roving mic go to Jean? This is called empowered leadership, friends.
Sorry. Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Ravi, for the hot question. First of all, I would like to thank you for naming me multiple times, but first thing I need to say is this is a teamwork, right? And it is about the ability of convening a team working together from across the CGIAR that has made it possible. I have not been, the central piece here. It's the energy within the CG that is the central piece. As for the NARS, I think the way we have done that in the ASEAN program is really first by listening. So making sure that we would send the right signal up front, that we would be going to them rather than expecting them to come to us. And so we have made, extra time, taken extra time, as you were saying, Alyssa. Yes, it has been a slow and difficult process, but we have taken the time to make sure that we would systematically involve these NARS, not all of them, we cannot involve all of them, but putting in place a process at the national level so that they would self-select and they would actually identify, who needs to be associated with this process on a particular topic at a given point in time. And then propose interlocutors. This is the way we have done it. And also systematically noting what would be the key point that would emerge in this discussion. The main difficulty has been then to identify convergence. Where is it that we see similarities, and where is it that we see that something that would be kind of consensus on main issues would emerge across the region and not on a country-by-country basis only. And that has been quite challenging because often we put different words behind concepts or expectations, and making sure that we were actually talking in the same language has been really the hard part about eliciting really what would be the 8 key areas of work that would emerge as common across the regions with different intensities in each country, of course. Stop here for the moment.
Thank you very much. I think key here is what you mentioned in terms of the self-selecting and then the prioritization. What I love about the ASEAN strategy was, and why I think the outcomes are so diverse and there's not an existing red thread, is because of that participation, and also that you had NARS even prioritize within that. So again, CG is not the one saying we know everything, rather it's here, please come together, see all of this data, and you decide for yourself what your priorities are. And Ravi, I think that's also what your organization does very, very well. So we're learning from the Pacific as well.
Thank you. Further contributions? Up there in the middle. Over there. Is there a microphone somewhere? Up there. Put up your hand. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Justin from the T&Q Drought and Innovation Hub here in Queensland. And thank you for One CGIAR giving their roadmap for the restructure. It's very interesting to see that. I just wanted to follow up on a point that Simon mentioned, and I invite the panel to also give their perspective. Simon, you mentioned secretive farmers. One of the bottlenecks for farmers to engage in collaboration is that secretiveness about their ideas and things like that. How do we break through those barriers internationally, but also domestically here in rural and regional Australia? And following on from that, how do we demystify this new buzzword of inclusive innovation? Because it's, does it pass the pub test? I don't know. Thank you. Yeah.
No, a very valid question, and I mean, it goes to that issue of trust and the issue of overusing jargon, which of course is something that we try to avoid. So I would really value the panel's opinion on that. Maybe we start with Simon.
I will start, and then I'll throw for the inclusive innovation bit. But the first part of the question was, how do we shift kind of a culture of, and a long baked in culture of competition, sometimes across fences type thing. I grew up on a farm that got bought out by the neighbour. I'm well aware of the approach to kind of business in some senses. But I think it's a long one, and it's one that if you don't start at some point, you're not going to start at all. And it's one that needs to be framed in terms of the opportunities of the collaborative energy rather than winning at the expense of someone else. And I think we don't do a great job of that in this country. The talk I went to, or the panel session yesterday on the Traction program and how the Netherlands and Denmark and Scandinavian countries do things really opened my eyes to, you know, them making a lot more value from what the lot they're given. And that's something that we don't have the history and the legacy of doing that like they do, but we can start somewhere. So I would say it's a long road to travel, but there are green shoots wherever you look. And I'll throw regarding inclusive innovation as the next thing.
Who would like to take that one on inclusive innovation? I mean, I can probably give a little bit of a background before I hand over to Permi, because the issue really became very apparent to us when we were looking at the new research initiatives and saw that there was that sort of focus on innovation, but there was always a bit of a question of how do you actually do it? How do you get that thinking out into the mainstream? How do you get it adopted? How do you scale up? And it became apparent how important it is to really think through that in a structured way and engage the stakeholders very, very early on in that process to ensure that whatever is being developed is developed in the right way and people have ownership of it. So that's why we started to focus on that issue of inclusivity. But it also was apparent that you can't just throw multidisciplinary teams together from different backgrounds. You actually need that basic capability of thinking in that way in the individual team members as well, rather than just having different disciplines thrown together as a team. And that sort of triggered our thinking about it, but I would value the reflection from Pumi about how we then actually approach that.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for the question. Is it vocal? Yeah. Yeah, when I was listening to the two questions, actually, I think they are quite interrelated because, and I like what Holger has said, is about trust, you know, that trust building, especially when it comes to, you know, farmers. From where I come from, as you know, we are normally, or they are being seen, you know, to come at the end of the value chain in terms of technology adoption. But once they have that perception or they are taken as equal partners in co-creation, right from the design of the research, the implementation, as well as the tail end in terms of decision making, you know, then, you know, those barriers, it becomes easier then to say, well, let us work together, we have these partnerships, and we're looking at the bigger picture in terms of, you know, moving and ensuring that we transform the agri-food systems. So that is what I wanted to maybe share. And also in terms of inclusive innovation, it also talks to that in terms of, you know, whether they are partners or they are the beneficiaries. So these terminologies are the ones really that we need to look into and ensure that they are part and parcel of the bigger goal and that bigger initiative. And it becomes easier right from the beginning. And I know that in South Africa, for example, we've now moved on in terms of looking at small-scale farmers, for example. These are small businesses. They are there also to contribute to the development of the country and also to the communities, to create employment and to empower others. So we're looking at it much broader and to say that, let us take them as decision makers and let them be part of that co-creation process. And then I think, it's not an easy process. It's quite complex, as we know, with the agri-food systems. But I think those are the initial entry points that can then help us in CGIAR, for example, in the work that we're doing and the impact that we want to make at the end of the day through this new strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question back there. Yes.
Hi, my name's John Oakeshott from the Pacific Community in Fiji, and I was very interested in a question towards Alyssa, but I noticed the question I had was actually directed towards Jean, who's here. So maybe the answer can be bounced between the two of them. With the survey that you undertook with 700 stakeholders and all the work you did, and ending up with the priorities for the regions and the 8 levels of programs, I was wondering. I can understand the what of the way you've done it and the why you've done it, but I'm just wondering about the sustainability and the future resilience of the process you've put together. Is this going to be a framework that is self-correcting over time, that you can get voices from the field feeding up through into the CGIAR priorities? Or is this something that has to be replicated every sort of 5 to 10 years to set those platforms again? Thank you.
Why don't we tag team on that, John? Thank you for your question, John, and especially this is relevant where you're coming from and you're asking through the motivated interests of the Pacific states. So I love your question because also we're still working on how we're working with you in the Pacific states. Regarding the sustainability of the topic, the fundamental stance of the One CGIAR is we are the framework to invite prioritization and wishes from beneficiaries, farmers, fisherfolk, water and livestock keepers. We are with that job. We don't see ourselves as being omnipresent and the ones that are looking down to decide. So fundamentally, by the nature of our governance, how we see ourselves, how we divide up funding, that's at the core. And the example of the ASEAN strategy here is that in place. And we're not perfect at it, and we're still working on it. So what we see is, apropos Simon's point before about innovative organizational, and Holger and Pumi's question to us about what is your institutional response to inclusive innovation in the long term, we are making decisions today for the next 50 years. And we do see this incremental type of transformation occurring. We also see this transformational innovation that we need to become. And so we also see the entire frameworks of how these inclusive partnerships are to occur also need to be reinvented or newly created. So it's agile, it's iterative, and it's literally multi-generational in approach. Jean, would you like to detail the ASEAN?
Unfortunately, we're out of time. So what I recommend is that you have the conversation afterwards, because this is only the beginning of a conversation. And this actually forms part of the science forum that we will continue to run in 2023. And all your questions and all your contributions are very welcome, and we want to incorporate that in order to advance that agenda further. I thank you very much for your very valuable contributions today, and I want to thank all of our speakers for the time and effort they have taken to contribute today. Thank you.